6-foot table talk. As we find out who walks the walk, it's the bane of our existence to practice social distance. 6-foot table talk.
Hello and welcome to another episode of 6-Foot Table Talk. My name is Nigel Eastman and I am the Director of Contemporary Worship and Community Development, and I have the honor of being your host today. But like last week, this is not about me. This is about the conversation, bringing civil discourse and understanding back to the table. So with that being said, let the 6-Foot Table Talk begin.
Hi, my name is Cammie Gaston, and I am a United Methodist pastor. I've served the church for about 33 years. I've served in the local church as well as being a chaplain in the Methodist hospital system. I've also worked in campus ministry and in the Connectional Church. And in all of these places, I have experienced walking with people in grief.
My name is Bonnie King. I am currently a spiritual director and a grief group facilitator working with faith and grief. In my 30 years of ministry, my positions have included youth minister, director of children's ministries, and executive director and founder of the Pines Catholic Camp. I transitioned to executive leadership in religious, educational, and healthcare foundations for the final 12 years of my career.
So Bonnie, I'm going to be asking you some questions today because I know you're in part our expert, and I'm glad you're here. Before I begin, I want to offer this quote from a book on grief. This comes from Nick Cave. It seems to me that if we love, we grieve. That's the deal. That's the pact. Grief and love are forever intertwined. Grief is the terrible reminder of the depth of our love, and, like love, grief is non-negotiable. As I think about grief, I was wondering if you remember the first time you actually offered counseling for someone who was going through grief.
Why, of course.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because I don't think you ever forget something like that.
Yeah.
When I had the Catholic camp, after about 10 years of operations, we had an unfortunate accident at the camp where one of our counselors drowned.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, exactly. And so I had the difficult task of calling his family in Ohio to break the news to them. And in that conversation and hearing the pain that I knew I would feel as a mother to get this news, I made the decision that I would accompany the body back to Ohio. Oh. So first I had to take care of preparing the body for travel, making the travel arrangements, and then going to Ohio. While I was there, my purpose in going was as a mother to present Jeremy to his mother, that I had brought him home. Mm-hmm. And then the 3 days that I remained there for all the rituals of grief, I stayed in the background. I listened to the stories. I listened to the sad stories, but I also heard laughter in the friends sharing of their times with Jeremy. Mm-hmm. And I was available for questions so that they might ask me anything they were curious about during the 2 years that he had been at our camp. Mm-hmm. So I was happy to share those moments with them also, the good times. Mm-hmm. However, what I realized in this is, similar to your quote, that it's love that makes grief so difficult. If we did not care so much for the person, we would not grieve so much. Yeah. So it's nothing to be embarrassed by. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
My uncle, who really was like my brother, he was only 5 years older than me, was in the hospital for 7 weeks. And so the isolation and the difficulty to get to him, and I did make phone calls and do those kind of touch bases kind of moments, but still, not being able to actually see him, that was difficult. And it was difficult for our family. So, when he passed away, side note, he was a United Methodist pastor. So he was a pastor of a church, active pastor of a church, passed away. And here we couldn't have a memorial service in the very place that he preached every week. And it was just heartbreaking. We thought, okay, we'll just put it off a few months. Let's see if maybe we can gather in the summertime. Certainly things will be finished by, and we'll all feel safe and good to be able to go out, but it wasn't happening that way. We made arrangements for us to be able to have it in a big venue so that we could all be separate. There was a lot of questions about, oh gosh, are we gonna, have people wear masks? And I'm saying yes, and other family members are saying no. And there's just this kind of tension around how do you do this? And we're grieving all at the same time, and we can't believe he's passed away. He's too young, all those things. And so there was just a layer of anxiety and fear and tension on top of the grief. And it was really, I don't want to be teary about it, but it was very painful. It ended up that we decided we would have an outdoor experience, that it would be safe enough for only family, and that we were, particularly several family members, were crying out for closure. I need closure, and to see and have his ashes and place it in this place. And so we did that. And I think, and honored him as best as we could, given the situation. But boy, was it tense at moments? Was it teary? Was it, it was also joyful. But it was just different, than we had expected. Or that we would have had in the past, I guess. But we managed it, and I hope it honored his life in a way that he was looking down and smiling, Thank you. But I think I have to just sit back and say it was the best we could do.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And you did it.
And we did it, and I appreciate you asking about that, because yes, it's fresh in me as well. I was wondering, what ways can loved ones and friends be present for somebody who is going through a difficult time, as well as persons who've lost loved ones, given all the changes of how close we can be, our 6 feet table, that kind of thing.
Yes. Again, each situation is different.
Okay.
And so checking to see what's allowed, whether you can share playlist, something like that on your phone that you could transfer that could be heard in the room, of familiar songs that you both enjoyed can be an option. Prayers, spiritual songs, it depends on what you think will be helpful. Then if you recognize that they are close to the end, I will share another personal story that my sister-in-law, whose husband had been fighting cancer, several different kinds of cancer, over 20 years. And they had moved back to Dallas because of this. And then when COVID happened, he became more isolated. and felt like his doctors were not paying attention to him and pretty much gave up. And so he ended up in the ER, ended up in ICU at the hospital, and it was apparent that he was at the end. And I respect this doctor so much because she suggested that my sister-in-law check with the T. Boone Pickens Hospice Center and move him over there because my sister-in-law could sit with him there.
You'd have the personal touch.
Yes. So they arranged the move. He was over there for a week, and she got to be with him every day of that week. So
gift.
it was a very big gift. So it's okay when you're a family member dealing with this unsure what's happening next to explore options. And let the hospital know that there's a social worker involved in every serious case. Find out what your options are that you might be able to do something that's more suitable for your family, for that family.
Yeah. Okay. So, so COVID-19 is a virus that is very contagious. How does the mere presence of this pandemic create grief around us?
I think that's the thing that at this point we cannot ignore. It has changed our world completely.
Absolutely.
And I know you're going to talk about order in sometime in our talk. So I feel like the good news is to recognize, what am I learning from this situation? What is the message of what I could do better? Maybe I'm supposed to make changes in my life because I've been called to make changes in my life, whether I didn't, whether I planned it or not. I have two sisters that were laid off from jobs that they are in their 60s. And in the last couple of years before retirement. So it's been very painful for them. But we are going through the exercises of what skills do you have that you want to continue sharing with the world?
Sure.
So it's asking yourselves that. Also, the loss of health insurance. That is one of the scariest things for people. And again, working with your church, your community, whatever resources you have at work, to find out how you might get new coverage, because that is critical at this time.
Yeah. I have found that that prayer, and particularly for me, I follow a prayer journal, and so I'll read something. I love Richard Rohr. I also use the Disciplines, which is a scriptural-based devotion series. But, and once I read those, and it sort of takes me away from my own concern and do the journaling, it ends up being a conversation with God. So that's one of the main things for me. But I've also heard people say that they really get a lot from meditation, from yoga. They get a lot from, and I do too, from tuning into worship. That you're with someone else. You can look online and see there's lots of people that are also, engaging in worship, singing the songs, praying the prayers. I think those are really important during this time. It grounds us still in community.
I think the most important thing about the grief journey is to know that it's about something that's bigger than you.
Yeah.
So thinking that you can do it on your own is not going to work well. It's going to take longer because you don't know everything. And we think of it as a multi-step process that you do step 1, 2, 3. Well, the reality is with grief, it's a spiral. And you start with step 1, you may jump to 3 and think, oh, wow, I'm really got this grief thing down. But then something happens that's puts you back to 2 or even 1. So know that, and know that it's all part of the process. The first step is shock and numbness, which is reflected in the difficulty to focus on any of the major steps and tasks that you need to complete after the loss of a loved one. So that's where it really helps to have family support at that time. The next phase is disorientation, and this is scary. This is scary because we become depressed. We start thinking of the things we could have done better and beat ourselves up about the death. Exhausted because we're not sleeping well, and isolated because we really don't want to talk to anybody because we know we're not a fun person to be with.
Yep.
And we don't care.
Yeah.
So if we make it through those stages, the searching and yearning is next. We want to share our story. Now we want to tell people the story about our loved one. And the interesting thing about it is, and I remember having this happen to me, is you hear a voice and it sounds like his voice. Yeah. You see somebody in line somewhere and think, oh, that's him? And it's not, but you're missing the laughter, the conversations you had, the feedback you gave each other, and just the silence of being together.
Yeah.
Reorganization is the final step. We begin to feel a sense of release, acceptance of what has happened, renewed energy, and we start making better decisions because we're getting sleep and we're willing to take those baby steps forward, planning for a future that will not have the loved one in it, but they will always have a place in our heart.
Yeah.
Well, how would you say the Christian faith organizes grief?
Speaks to that. Oh gosh, I just listened to a wonderful talk on this around thinking of order, like the created order, how we live, and then disorder, the thing that happens when we have a change in our life. All this COVID is definitely disordering, along with losing a loved one. That's disordering. And then reordering. And as I think about it, how it connects to the Christian life, those three concepts, of course, there's this, created person living in God's creation. And then like the story of Christ, he's got all this ordering going on that's just this beautiful connection of sharing peace and hope and love and connecting to one another and this big embrace of all of creation. And then there's this disordering thing happens that you think, how could this even happen? And Christ is crucified and there's this death and then, his followers are at a place where they say, what do we do now? We're afraid. And how do we cope with this? And they go and hide out. And it's the women that come to the tomb and then share what they find, this empty tomb, this resurrection. And for them, it's this resurrection hope that life has been ever altered because we loved Christ, and we will continue to. And there is this greater God that's still a part of our life that gives us hope, and we can reorder and tell the story. And so, I think it very much is connected to our Christian life and journey as we think about the order, the disorder, and the reordering, the life, the death, and the resurrection, that all of us have opportunity to have resurrected life. And that gift came from this peace-giving Christ who gives us hope, who constantly is saying, why are you weeping? I am risen. Come with me and be risen with me. Now, it takes a while to get to that point, sometimes, but it's always true.
Yes.
You know, and that's the thing that, as I think about, COVID-19 and this pandemic time and grief, is that we do have a lot of hope that our reordering life maybe can put us in a right path, And so that's what I would offer as I think about what the Christian faith has to say.
Well, I think that's a perfect summary of what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
So I wanted to end our time together, if it's okay, with a quote from our friend Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
Grief happens upon you. It's bigger than you. There's a humility that you have to step into where you surrender to be moved through the landscape of grief by grief itself. To resist, to fight it, is to hurt yourself. There is a challenge to relax in the awesome power of it until it's gone through you. Wow. Amen.
Amen. I hope people find healing and hope and wholeness in this time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. May God bless you all.
6 Foot Table Talk. As we find out who walks the walk.